Have you ever wondered what the person you love would do if they believed you had lost everything? Just hours before proposing, one billionaire made a decision so unbelievable that it stunned an entire city. He disguised himself as a homeless beggar and waited outside an upscale restaurant where his fiancée was about to arrive. What happened next wasn't just a test of love, it became a powerful lesson about kindness, dignity, and the true measure of a person's heart. By the end of this story, millions would be talking about one simple act that changed lives forever. And you may never look at a stranger the same way again. Just hours before proposing to the woman he believed was the love of his life, he made one decision or one saw coming. Disguised as a homeless beggar, he waited outside the restaurant. But what happened next changed both of their lives forever. On one of the city's most luxurious streets, where expensive cars lined the curb and elegantly dressed guests disappeared through polished glass doors, a lonely figure sat quietly beside the entrance. His coat was stained, his shoes were torn, and his beard looked as though it had gone untouched for months. Most people never looked twice. Those who did quickly looked away. What none of them knew was that beneath the worn clothes sat a billionaire only hours away from announcing his engagement before friends, family, and business partners. The elegant celebration inside had been planned for months. But one question still haunted him. Did the woman he loved truly love him? Or had his success quietly become part of the attraction? Only one person knew the truth. His oldest friend stood across the street, pretending to scroll through his phone while secretly watching everything unfold. He had begged him to abandon the idea, warning that genuine relationships could not be measured through a single moment. But the groom's past was filled with betrayal, fake smiles, and people who admired his fortune more than his character. Tonight, he needed certainty more than comfort. Minutes passed like hours. Pedestrians hurried by without slowing. Some wrinkled their noses in disgust. A group of young professionals laughed as they tossed careless remarks in his direction before disappearing into the restaurant. Even the valet politely suggested he move farther away so guests would not feel uncomfortable. He simply nodded and remained seated. This was never about money. It was about compassion. When nobody was watching. It was about dignity, offered to someone who appeared to have nothing. Across the street, a black SUV pulled to the curb. The restaurant staff immediately straightened their uniforms as an elegantly dressed family stepped onto the sidewalk, smiling for photographs and greeting familiar faces. At the center walked the woman he intended to marry, radiant with quiet confidence, completely unaware that the greatest question of their future waited only a few steps ahead. Then, as she lifted her eyes toward the entrance, they met the weary stranger sitting alone. When she finally walked toward him, everyone expected her to ignore him. But the next 60 seconds left the entire street frozen. The sidewalk seemed to come alive as the guests welcomed the young woman with warm smiles and excited congratulations. Dressed in an elegant gown that reflected the evening lights, she carried herself with quiet grace rather than pride. Her parents walked proudly beside her, while close friends chatted about the celebration waiting inside. To everyone watching, she looked like someone about to begin the happiest night of her life. Then laughter broke the perfect scene. Several guests glanced toward the ragged beggar sitting near the restaurant entrance and exchanged uncomfortable smiles. One man joked that someone should pay him to disappear before he ruined the expensive photographs. Others laughed softly, pretending not to notice the cruelty hidden behind their words. The security guards stepped forward. "I'm sorry," one of them said firmly. "You'll have to leave. Our guests are arriving." The disguised billionaire lowered his eyes and spoke so quietly that they almost missed his words. "I don't need money. Could someone please spare a bottle of water?" The request was simple, yet one wealthy couple ignored him completely. Another guest shook his head without slowing down. Someone muttered that helping people like him encouraged them to stay on the streets. His oldest friend watched from across the road, his heart pounding. Every cruel reaction confirmed exactly why this test mattered. Then she stopped walking. Her family noticed immediately. "Come on," her mother whispered gently. We'll be late." Another relative smiled awkwardly. "Someone else will help him." For a brief moment, she stood completely still, caught between the expectations of everyone around her and the quiet voice inside her own heart. Without saying another word, she turned away from the restaurant, ignoring the confused looks behind her. She walked directly toward the lonely stranger. She knelt beside him without hesitation. "Are you all right?" she asked softly. Her voice carried no fear, no disgust, and no pity, only genuine concern. She handed him a cold bottle of water from her purse, then asked one of the restaurant employees if they could bring him something warm to eat. While waiting, she noticed the holes in his shoes and the chill in the evening air. Without thinking twice, she removed the elegant scarf from around her shoulders and gently wrapped it around his neck. "I hope this helps," she said, with a warm smile. She never looked closely enough to recognize the man beneath the disguise. She simply saw another human being who deserved kindness. Around them, conversations fell silent. Even those who had mocked him moments earlier watched in stunned disbelief. But just as everyone assumed the story was over, one tiny detail caught her attention and everything began to change. As she adjusted the scarf around the stranger's shoulders, she paused for just a second. There was something about his eyes that refused to let her look away. They carried a quiet sadness, but beneath it was a familiarity she couldn't explain. When he thanked her, the sound of his voice stirred the same uneasy feeling. She tilted her head slightly. "I'm sorry," she said with a gentle smile. "Have we met before?" For one terrifying moment, his heart almost gave him away. Every instinct urged him to tell her the truth, but he forced himself to lower his gaze. "I don't think so," he replied softly. "People usually forget faces like mine." She accepted the answer, yet the strange feeling lingered. She couldn't understand why a complete stranger felt oddly familiar, as though life had crossed their paths long before this evening. Inside, however, another battle was unfolding. He remembered the years before success, when dreams were bigger than bank accounts. Back then, friendships felt effortless, but after building an empire, everything changed. Invitations multiplied, compliments became constant. People praised his generosity while quietly calculating the value of knowing him. More than once, relationships had collapsed the moment money entered the conversation. Every betrayal left another scar, until one fear overshadowed all the others. What if the woman he loved had fallen for the life he could provide instead of the man he truly was? That single question had followed him every day leading to this moment. Across the street, his oldest friend continued recording discreetly, barely believing what he was witnessing. The camera captured every expression, every whispered conversation, and every unexpected act of compassion unfolding before them. Not everyone approved. Several family members exchanged embarrassed glances. One guest sighed impatiently. "This is getting ridiculous. Everyone is waiting inside." Another shook his head. "She's delaying her own celebration over a homeless man." The young woman stood calmly and faced them without anger. "If showing kindness makes us late," she said, "then we're late for the right reason. Compassion should never be treated like an inconvenience." Her words silenced the sidewalk. The disguised billionaire felt an overwhelming wave of emotion crash over him. This wasn't polite generosity performed for attention. There were no cameras she knew about, no reward she expected, and no audience she was trying to impress. She had simply chosen humanity when everyone else chose comfort. His vision blurred. Behind the carefully crafted beard, tears gathered in his eyes. She had already answered the question he had carried for years, and she didn't even know she was taking the test. Now ask yourself, honestly, would you have stopped or walked past? Then, without warning, he reached up and removed something that left the entire crowd speechless. Without saying another word, the stranger lifted a trembling hand to his face. His fingers fanned the edge of the worn, grey beard and slowly peeled it away. A stunned silence spread across the sidewalk. Then he removed the weathered wig that had hidden his hair before slipping off the oversized, tattered jacket that concealed the tailored suit beneath. For several long seconds, no one spoke. The laughter vanished. The whispers stopped. Even the traffic beyond the restaurant seemed to fade into the background as every pair of eyes fixed on the man standing before them. A chorus of shocked gasps broke the silence. His fiancée stared at him, unable to move. Confusion flooded her face before recognition finally settled in. Her eyes widened, and she instinctively covered her mouth, struggling to believe what she was seeing. The security guards immediately stepped back, their confident expressions replaced with embarrassment. They realized the man they had tried to remove was the very guest of honor they had been instructed to protect. Around them, attitudes shifted almost instantly. The guests who had mocked him only moments earlier suddenly avoided eye contact. One man nervously apologized for his careless jokes. Another admitted he should have offered help. Family members who had urged her to walk away now smiled awkwardly, pretending they had supported her kindness from the beginning. He acknowledged none of them. His attention never left the woman standing in front of him, with quiet emotion in his voice. He said, "Money can attract attention. Success can earn applause, but neither can tell you who truly sees your heart." She listened without interrupting. "I needed to know," he continued, "whether you would treat a stranger with the same respect you show someone important. Tonight, you believed I had nothing to offer you, no influence, no wealth, no status, yet you still chose kindness." He looked down at the scarf resting around his shoulders. "You gave warmth without expecting gratitude. You offered dignity when everyone else offered judgment. You reminded me that character isn't measured by what we own, but by how we treat people who cannot repay us." Emotion filled his eyes once again. Reaching into his pocket, he slowly removed a small velvet box and opened it, revealing a brilliant engagement ring that caught the evening lights. But instead of asking the question everyone expected, he smiled softly and said, "Before I ask you to spend your life with me, I need to thank you. You passed the only test that truly mattered, without ever knowing you were taking it." But the most unforgettable moment wasn't the proposal. It was what she said before giving her answer. She looked at the open ring box, then back into his eyes. A gentle smile slowly replaced the shock on her face. Before reaching for the ring, she took his hands and spoke with quiet honesty. "Yes," she said, "I want to spend my life with you. But promise me something. Trust should never have to survive because of a test. It should grow because we choose to believe in each other every day." Her words settled over the silent crowd with unexpected power. He nodded, emotion filling his voice. "You're right," he admitted. "I let old betrayals convince me that doubt was safer than trust. I'm sorry for putting you through this." She squeezed his hands, accepting both the apology and the proposal. In that moment, their relationship became stronger not because the test had succeeded, but because they chose honesty over fear. Around them, the guests reflected on their own behavior. The people who had laughed, looked away, or judged the stranger without a second thought now faced an uncomfortable truth. Appearances had shaped their decisions far more than character ever had. Days later, the secretly recorded video appeared online. Millions watched what began as a shocking reveal, but the conversation quickly shifted. Viewers praised her compassion far more than his disguise. News outlets shared the story, social media filled with heartfelt reactions, and thousands of people posted personal experiences about strangers whose simple kindness had changed difficult moments in their lives. The couple decided to use the attention for something meaningful. Together, they began supporting organizations that served people experiencing homelessness, encouraging others to look beyond appearances and remember the humanity every person deserves. Long after the headlines faded, one lesson continued inspiring people everywhere. Real character is never revealed when applause is guaranteed. It appears in the quiet moments when no reward is expected, no cameras are noticed, and no recognition is promised. Because the greatest measure of a person's heart isn't how they treat those who can change their future. It's how they treat those they believe can offer nothing in return. And sometimes, the smallest act of kindness becomes the moment that changes a life forever.